Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role-playing games and the weird, wonderful people behind them. Hello Weirdos, this is Diogo Nogueira, and today on Weird Games and Weirder People we have the return of our previous guest, Hodag. Hodag is an artist and RPG designer and really someone passionate about art, about creativity, about comics. And in this return episode, we talk about so many things. It's really free-form. We talk about anime, we talk about our passions with RPGs, how he changed gears when he started making games, and how he sees the difference between games that are really well matured in a lot of mechanics and games that are really more free-form, that you can create your own stuff. We talked about our favorite cartoons, our favorite superheroes. We talked about many things like systems that we enjoy or something we find some problems the way we play the game. We talked about the MDA framework and game design. It was really a long chat, a really deep one. We got really profound in some issues. We talked about a little of our childhood and how that affects the art that we do. It was really great, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, so let's get weird with Hodag Part II. Hello Weirdos, it's Diogo Nogueira again, and we have Hodag back here with us with a special bonus episode. So Hodag, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. I just woke up at the crack of dusk to talk to you.
Yeah. How? What time is it
friend,
there?
yeah.
What time is it there for you?
It's just after 4 p.m. So
Wow.
with the time change, and we have daylight savings time here in the States, so it's like it's starting to get a little. Actually, honestly, this is the first time in about since the time change that I've been awake where there's still been a little light outside. So uh, thanks for that, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, here we are like in the middle of the spring, but it feels like summer. Like the thermal sensation yesterday, it reached like 54.5 Celsius. So it's insanely hot here in Brazil. But I'm in my
Oh,
room in my air conditioner, and we're ready to talk weird. And
it's a it's
sure.
so funny you being in the southern hemisphere, because up here in the northern hemisphere where I am, it is a brisk fall day where the leaves are falling, and there's definitely going to be a hot cup of coffee and maybe some footy pajamas in my
Yeah.
before I need to start my process for the day. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Drinking I like coffee, but like drinking hot coffee in this warmth is like self-torture or something.
Yeah,
So
oh yeah. No, during the summer,
yeah.
I drink coffee during the summer, but like I definitely, like it chilled or cooled. And
Yeah.
so a lot of
Yeah.
times, I'll take coffee and I'll we have these cups, these insulated thermal, mug.
Yeah.
I don't know how you describe them. They're sort of metal and they
Yeah.
have a plastic lid on the top, like a tumbler. And basically, I'll fill those up at night, and then in the morning I'll add my special, sugar-free creamers or whatever. So, but yeah, it's during the winter I do enjoy having, a hot cup of Joe uh, to start the
Yeah.
day. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, here now I'm trying something with like I said latte coffee and drinking coffee with orange juice. It's quite nice. Like you put ice, orange juice, and coffee, and it's a nice mixture, like a tropical kind of coffee. And I like orange juice too. So yeah, and
Are
and
you
it
um
helps.
are you a are you a pulp guy or a no pulp guy? Do you like pulp in your orange juice or no?
I like it. It's well, if
Yeah.
it's like made with real, like if you see people with the orange they're doing, I like pulp. It's no, it has the fibers. All the good stuff is in the pulp, right? I don't know. That's what I
Yeah,
think. I
well,
don't know
I
if
think I
it's
think
true, but
so.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's it's been many years since I've drank orange juice, but when I used to drink orange juice, I was a pulp guy.
Yeah.
And then it's too sugary for me now. My doctor said
Yeah.
no, and I said okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. It's almost like drink Coke, like Coca-Cola. It's
Yeah,
almost the same. I don't know.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. But there is one here
So
that we buy from this place that they do it at the time you buy it, and it's so fresh, it's so good, and we end up buying like every week like 2 to 3 liters of this. So yeah, I need to reduce
leaders.
this. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
we use
yeah,
liters here, like
yeah, yeah.
we use meters,
I'm
liters. Yeah, all that's
I'm
no.
on Imperial, buddy. I don't know what that is. So you're
Yeah,
gonna have to break that down into gallons for me because
yeah,
I'm, an American. We don't.
yeah. That's another thing. Us from outside of the US, because US is basically the standard of RPGs and language that we have to write
Yeah,
to. But we from Brazil and probably from everybody else when they're writing their games, and especially OSR stuff because it's feet, 30 feet, 10 feet, and stuff. So we have to make all these conversions when we're writing stuff because we're thinking meters, but we have to write in feet and in pounds. We're thinking kilograms, and it's weird. But I noticed in some sci-fi RPGs, they use meters, they use kilograms. Like I think Trevor used the
yeah.
metric system, right? Do you have
That's
any
the
difficulty leading with the metric system in RPGs that use it?
Oh yeah, I hate it. I hate but my beloved Star Wars. My beloved Star Wars, my first fandom, my first love in life, as far as having that deep fandom, betrayed me because all of their Star Wars role playing games are all in meters and kilometers and having to figure out, it's like, oh well, this person is, I think they started using squares because when I started playing, they were doing the D20
Oh yeah,
conversion.
Saga
Yeah,
Edition. Yeah.
so it was, yeah. Well, no, the original. I had the original thin book,
Okay.
and then I also have the revised. I don't have the Saga Edition. I never played the Saga Edition.
Yeah,
Everyone speaks
that's what
very
I did
highly of
too.
it.
I did it.
Yeah,
I did the
everyone.
original, they revised it, and then when it came Saga, I said, "Fuck this! You're releasing a new game every movie.
Yeah,
Fuck you!"
which I
And
should
I,
have. Those go for like $3 trillion now, like on the
yeah,
secondary market. Like if you got the Saga Edition
yeah,
book, especially
I got
a
the
nice
Saga
copy, they go.
afterwards, but yeah,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's worth big bucks now.
yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And
So
do
because
you have
people
any
love it.
difficulties when you play this? How do you have to
I mean,
converse
no,
on the
because
fly or?
the way I GM is very loosey goosey. So I just kind of,
Okay, yeah, yeah,
be
yeah,
like, okay, I'm not going to sit there and figure out meters. And also, too, if we're doing
yeah,
space battle, I'm not going to figure out pitch
yeah,
and yaw and whatever
yeah.
else. It's going to be like, all right, you got two TIE fighters on your flank. Go ahead and make a, dodge roll, and we'll see it. One time I couldn't. I'll make up little systems at my table. As I've always been creating. That's the reason it was so easy for me to kind of like step into the, not to be a brag guy, to just be a braggart or something like that. But the at the table, I was always making up little mini games on the fly. Like we had this one, we were playing this Star Wars game that I made shortly before. I think it was like late 2019. So it was one of the last games that I played in person before the pandemic. But it was a I basically set out six D20s, and then what I did was I set out 60 20s. I had the player set up 60 20s, and the players were trying to have their ship jump away via hyper jump. So I said, we're just gonna do straight rolls for the thing because the system that I had devised, I hadn't figured out. Oh, this is a bulk cruiser. It's got a +4 or whatever. So I said, it's just going to be narrative. Each time that we'll re-roll the dice, I'm going to try to catch up to you. So basically, I'll roll a dice, you roll a dice, and if you beat me, however, you write down how much you beat me by, and if you get up to a certain point, I think it was 10 or 15. If you can get up to 15, then I can't catch you. And of course, the first, two rolls I roll are two threes, and
Yeah.
the player rolled two, like two high numbers, and so they beat it in like three rolls, and they were able to get away really quickly. But after the session was over, everybody was like, "Oh, that was so cool! I've never seen that in an RPG before. Like, where did you come up with that? Like, I really like that." And so it was just kind of like, but yeah, I don't know. People need to get more creative at their tables, I guess, or not that they aren't already, but like, I think that like I see a lot of 5e people and a lot of people that are newer to the hobby that got brought in through fifth edition and stuff like that. They don't kind of realize that you can do whatever you want at the table. You don't even have to look at the books if you don't want to. You should,
Yeah.
sometimes, but like, as long as and also too, maybe that's privilege that comes with, being a GM at this point for almost a decade and a half, or, having been role playing for a decade and a half. Like, you just know that you can just do whatever you want. But I forgot
Yeah.
what we were talking about, so I went on a whole big tangent there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. But it's a cool tangent. It's a theme I like to talk a lot about. It kind of brings back memories of D&D fourth edition, and I think it has to do with experience too, but I think it also has to do with the system and how the game is presented to the players. Because you take, for example, D&D fourth edition, when you have this huge character sheet, you have the attributes, you have skills, you have all this myriad of power. So you have a lot going on in your character sheet. You have a lot of options, a lot of buttons to push. So if you have a lot of buttons to push, there isn't much encouragement for you to seek out solutions outside of your character sheet. So if a character sheet offers you so much stuff that in most of the stuff end up solving your problems, yeah, I think players are not encouraged to think outside of these ready-made solutions. I think it's the same way with battle virtual tabletops or battle maps. I love Theater of the Mind, but I see the value too of maps and miniatures. It's so beautiful. You can really the tactical elements of the technology elements touching this piece is very cool. But when you have everything in front of you, like you see the setting, you see the characters, you see everything in the scene, I think players don't think much more beyond what they see. So if they're in a tavern and they don't see a bottle on the table they're fighting, they won't think about grabbing the bottle and smashing on an enemy's head. So I think when we give it too much to players, and they can have a lot to choose from, and they all in front of their eyes and don't have to imagine very much, I think they tend to limit the options they try to do. What do you think about that?
well, I think, yeah, I started during the third edition of role playing, the Y2K era. So with third edition, and in third edition Dungeons and Dragons, you have a lot of stuff on your character sheet. Too much stuff on
Yeah,
your character sheet. You have feats, skills, your base stats. You have the
yeah,
weapons with base attack bonus, and there's a lot of crunch that you have to figure out immediately. But one thing I did like about it was while you were pouring through those feats and skills, you were looking at what your character could do. And it was like, I always remember I always built really underpowered characters because I wanted to do something that was cool and different. So it was always like, in the name of in third edition, the name of the game was stack up as many feats and skills as possible. That way you
yeah,
can have the highest bonus to do whatever.
yeah. I
Which
remember that.
I,
Yeah,
I'm making a game called 20 Day where I'm taking that sort of idea, but it's less like feats don't give you. It's not like a stack. Like the highest you can have is +5 on anything,
yeah,
and the goal is not to get like to have these massive pluses, but to get more well-rounded as time goes on because you're doing more and more things, so you're adding more and more pluses as time goes on, but like the cap is so short, the +5, that you're actually going through and getting
yeah,
better at a bunch of stuff instead of like just really focusing and honing in on getting such high stacking numbers in one or two things. But I really did like the feats and the skills because it made those characters feel unique, and everybody at the table could have a completely different set of abilities, could have a completely different set of whatever, because everybody was kind of stacked up. But Magic in Dungeons and Dragons is broken. That's a tangent that we can get into later if you choose. But like I always play non-magical characters for the most part, fighters and barbarians, and a lot of times I'll play clerics or druids. But and sometimes I used to love to play bards, but I would never use my magic stuff, because I always view bards as non-magical, and whenever I make games, bards are always like entertainers are always non-magical because I just don't see a lot of value in that. I like them more as part of the rogue class. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's always interesting to see how people kind of get sidelined when they first start playing role-playing games, and a lot of times if you're playing something like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know. I'm also very traditional, like I said in the previous episode. Though I do believe that it is good to start with D&D, but then you absolutely after that point you should branch out as far and as wide as you possibly can, because it's like there's that quintessential experience of the and it doesn't have to be branded as D&D. It could be OSC, it could be any sort of permutation of such for Dungeons and Dragons Third Edition, or any of the copy, sort of Blue Home, or any of those books, any of those, but like having that sort of like fantasy Dungeons and Dragons experience, and then branching out from there to kind of see what's open in the wild world. So you can get into story games, or you can go get into. When I was a kid, everything was very technical, so there was like a lot of these big codexes and books or whatever, and you'd have to go and now it's like you can get a zine game and you can download it to your computer and print it off. But like when I was younger, this is
Yeah.
tying the onion to my belt, as was the style at the time, to quote Grandpa Simpson. But it was we'd have to go, if you wanted a new role playing game, you'd have to go and drop $50. Like that was our between 30 and $50 basically to get a big codex for Alternity or D20 Modern, or the Star Wars role playing game, or something like Hackmaster, or whatever else was out in the world back then. There was a ton of games that I would love to play. I actually had the Dragon Ball Z, the R. Telstorian Games Dragon Ball Z Anime Exchange game,
Yeah, the
and that
Fusion
was
one.
awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, Fusion, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever play that, or did you ever look at it?
Yeah, because they had a record of Lodoss War Fusion RPG, and was at that time
Oh,
I was really into record of Lodoss War. I like a Dragon Ball, but we played Dragon Ball with a Brazilian system that's kind of, for me, it's kind of perfect for anime. It's very simple, very streamlined. It's called Tokyo Defenders, or Defensores de Tóquio, as we call here in Brazil. Uh, and initially that game was kind of a parody of anime and Power Rangers kind of series, but it kind of evolved to
yeah.
its own thing, and then people take it serious now. And there's actually a new edition coming, being released this year, and they really went big on the crowdfunding. I'm excited to see what they come up. But yeah, Fusion, I had it because of Record of Lodoss War. Do you know Record of Lodoss
Ah,
War?
no.
Uh,
Sorry.
no, it's
I've heard,
yeah,
I've heard of it, certainly, but I never got into. I'm not an anime guy. I've
me
seen. I
neither.
mean, I've seen enough. You know.
Yeah,
I've seen. I've opened my um
yeah.
I've opened my mind to that.
It's
Yeah.
basically, yeah. I'm not really a big anime guy. I was more like when I was a teenager or something. Then I went to art school, and I had a really fantastic teacher, a professor that I call master until today. like he's my Sith Lord or something.
Yeah,
But
your sensei.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But he's a fantastic teacher, very wise. He would pass on any knowledge he had without holding anything back. He's really fantastic. But he really hated anime, mangas, and stuff. He uh, was really more into like classic art and stuff. And he knows a lot about art. Like he knows a lot. And he pointed me to great artists, like unknown artists. He knows a lot of stuff. But he would say like anime and manga, it's kind of pedophilia because it always has this, these scenes that they show the, the underwear. They always have this small sensual, sexual things happening with
Uh,
characters that are basically kids and stuff. So and it's part of their kind of their culture, their magazines. They explore this kind of weird stuff. So yeah, so I was
yeah, I remember
slowly put
when I
away
was a
from it.
kid,
Yeah.
Dragon Ball. My friends are always telling me about Dragon Ball, how they changed a lot of the stuff to take out some of the more risque elements of the thing. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They changed, I think, like a pair of women's underwear
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
dollar bills,
Yeah.
and that was the most. There was a small pig character named Oolong, who was part of their journey, and he was, kind of a leisure suit Larry type. Uh, so if I recall correctly, it's been many, many years at this point. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I was always more of a Western animation fan. So, obviously when I was growing up, a lot of, being a superhero fan from, a very early age, when
What
Batman
what would
animated
be
series came out and X-Men.
your
What?
favorite cartoon series? Like, yeah, well, Batman animated series, it's incredible good. So yeah, that's
Oh
one. But
yeah.
what would be like your favorite one since you enjoy more
Um,
Western animation stuff?
I would say that probably, I mean, honestly, like Justice League Unlimited was like the pinnacle for me. When that came out, and I was like, Justice League came out in, I think, '01, just as I was starting high school, like maybe 2000 or 2001, and during that year. And then by the time that I was finishing high school, they had worked their way all the way up through Justice League Unlimited, and that had all of the it had a lot more of the superheroes and really kind of like rewarding people that were like comics fans or superhero fans with a lot of like, oh, that's the original Vigilante. Oh, that's Shining Knight. They did a whole episode with like the Seven Soldiers of Victory, or they did a
Nice, nice.
it's a very deep,
Yeah.
deep cut. So yeah, I mean, I was huge into that. Growing up, I mean, I don't know, Batman Beyond, Batman, Superman the animated series, I always really loved because it was a much lighter tone, than the Batman was like, him agonizing. And, it was for kids, but it really allowed kids to have access to maybe deeper emotions than, I think I learned a lot about my own emotional states from watching Batman because, they would have these very, I mean, it was very kid appropriate, but it was like these like melodramas basically where, you would have access to those deep, deep emotions of grief or sadness or shock or
Yeah.
surprise or whatever. And it was I think you were able to really, and they would talk about them over the course of the series. So that was very good. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I watched a lot of kids adventure stuff. I remember there was I think I was a little old for it when it came out. Like I was just on the cusp of being kind of too old for it, but that's never stopped me at all for, Pokemon came around when I
Oh
was
yeah.
technically too old for it. And then I got really into Pokemon Blue. but
Yeah. I did too, of
and some of the
course. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, well it's cool,
Yeah.
Pokemon is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
I hate to
yeah.
be the old guy who's like, I don't know any of the new Pokemon, but after the
Yeah.
original 151 Kanto version, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, it's a dog with a
Yeah.
spike on its head, cool. I mean, but like I like those original creatures a lot, so I have
Yeah.
a very big affinity for
Yeah.
the
Well,
old ones. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I asked Kelsey Dion, so I'm gonna ask you if you had to choose Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charmander.
So I used to, as a child, always choose Squirtle,
Me
because
too.
War Turtle is my favorite Pokemon, the second evolution of Squirtle. He's got the wings on his head that always kind of remind me of like Jay Garrick the Flash. Also, too, it's just a good design. I don't know. there's something really stinky looking about this little turtle guy. I got really excited about War Turtle.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's, that's great. And then but
The
I as an
sunglasses,
adult,
the
well, yeah,
Squirtle
the
with the
little
sunglasses. It's
turtle squad, yeah,
fantastic.
Squirtle
Yeah,
squad,
yeah.
yeah.
That's why I like
So good.
Squirtle. Yeah,
Yeah, because they're cool. They're cool.
yeah,
But yeah, I as an adult, when I went back to it and I started playing those games over again, I'm pretty much always a Bulbasaur main, just because I don't know, they're stinky little vegetable cat guys, and that's pretty cool to me. And also, I
yeah,
just kind of like their progression through Venusaur and what's the big one? What's the ultimate
yeah,
evolution? It's Bulbasaur, Venusaur, and then I forget what the last one is.
yeah.
So the people are screaming at their podcast right now, being like, "It's
Yeah,
the,
it's too
this
many
one,
names. I
but
mean, yeah, it's too many names. Like,
yeah, yeah,
who is this Pokemon?
well,
Yeah, it's too many. And the new ones, and you started learning the new ones because my kid is always watching. He loves Pokemon, and I wish Nintendo would translate the games to Portuguese because we have
oh, that would be
Nintendo
nice.
Switch,
Yeah,
but it's only in English. They have all bunch of languages, but not Portuguese. So yeah,
that's you'd think that that's kind of a big misstep on
yeah,
their part, but
yeah. Brazil
um,
is a big matter. I mean, Portugal is nothing. I mean, as marketing, but as a market, it's small. But Brazil is gigantic. But yeah,
yeah.
but we but Brazilians they pirate everything, so that's probably why they are not translating it.
Yeah, have to hack it, I guess, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But yeah, well, if they're not going to make it themselves, that's
yeah,
well, you got to have that. Take that into consideration. If you're not going
yeah,
to give the people what they need, that's the reason I always
yeah,
have like I don't know, stuff in my games where I'm like feel free to like I always used to put in my one page games and Hodag is 100% free. It's I always say it's
yeah.
considered to be in the public domain. So, but I was like, feel free to hack, remix, whatever. So I don't know what the legality is, but wherever you are, feel free to do it. I guarantee you, I will not sue you. So you have carte
Yeah,
blanche for my. You can bring
yeah,
this up in court. You can play this audio. I will not. I will not sue if you want to use my games and translate
yeah.
them or whatever, or even just print them off and sell them yourself. You know what I mean? Like everybody wins
Mm.
at that point.
Yeah, or print them out and hand them to people at comms and stuff. That
Yeah,
could be
yeah. Well,
great.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's I do a lot of home printing, so and stuff. So I've got like a bunch of um beneath the dungeon floor that I printed off with some weird stuff, and I did
yeah,
recently I did a quest for Mount Sword, which is sort of a hack of Escape the Hyper Trench that I did. That's a fantasy hack. And
nice.
so I've been printing those off, kind of using different printing methods and
Yeah,
getting weird with it. But yeah, it's yeah, for Hodag, I think I'd have to go to I couldn't print that off at home. I'd have to go to a larger printer because it's a lot of
yeah,
pages. So, but
yeah. Hodag, you seem very into superheroes, especially DC. Uh, where did you play DC superheroes RPGs? Do you like superhero RPGs? And have you
I
ever wanted to make one?
I've bought many superhero RPGs over the course of the years. I had the DC Adventures when that came out. I had the which was I think a Mutants and Masterminds kind of hack. I had Mutants and Masterminds. And then I have I mean literally I think in 2020 I just bought like up all of the old phase rip stuff that I possibly could. I have yet to play a superhero RPG. I've made several, but I have not been able to play a superhero
Oh,
RPG because every single time that I try to set one up or get one going or something like that, I haven't been able to. Alan Barr's Gallant Knight Games Super D6 Super
tiny
D6
supers,
Supers.
tiny
Yes,
supers.
Tiny
Yeah,
Supers. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know why my brain was blanking on that. He was kind enough to send me a copy, and I'm loving that. In fact,
it's
I just did a
great.
bunch of,
Yeah,
yeah. I just did a bunch of sketch cards, and so I'm going to probably stat those out. And he gave me his blessing to distribute those with little write ups on the back. But yeah, I have yet to play a superhero game. I don't know what it is where I just can't ever every single time that I plan one or get one going. But I think that it's like that's one of the hardest genres to kind of go.
Yeah.
People speak highly of masks, but I hate PBTA. I don't like that system, and so the I had a couple of bad experiences with Dungeon World, and
Me
a
me
few
too.
I played Power.
Me too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
The
I
problem.
ha
Okay, so here's.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No,
I
no, no.
ha
You were gonna say something.
I have a joke that I say here in Brazil. I mean, it's okay for us to like different things. I have nothing against PBTA. It's not something that I enjoy, especially because what I'm about to say, you reference stuff that I said before. I feel like PBTA, for me, it seems like D&D fourth edition without the grid. You have all these
Yeah,
moves, which are the powers. So you have all this ready-made stuff. So you don't have to think too much outside the box because all the solution is out there. You have to click it. So for me, that's my grief with PBTA. It's the moves. Everything has a move, and you have to look at this move. So it seems like there's a lot of rules. Not a lot of rules, just one rule, like roll the dice and look at the move. But you have to consult too many stuff to play, and it for me it feels like reading the powers from D&D fourth edition, but just without the grid, you know.
yeah, yeah. No, I totally see that, and I agree with you. My main issue with it, which is, I can sit through a bad mechanics system. I can play through, like I said, I played that R. Talsorian Dragon Ball Z game, and that is just impenetrable from many aspects. But I think we've all played role playing games that have funky mechanics. I've played GURPS
Yeah.
Traveler, so I'm used to
Wrong master.
very
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, yes, yes. My problem with the Powered by the Apocalypse and Dungeon World and things of that nature is, um, it comes from this, and I think that this is my most controversial sort of take and stance, but players shouldn't have agency, characters should. And I feel like well, players should have agency. Let me walk that back real quick because that's wrong. That was a misspeak. But the player should have agency and protections at the table, right? For things, elements that they don't want to thing. Like I'm a big believer in safety tools. Usually the safety tools, though, I think should be talked about in like a session zero when you're starting the campaign up, and you say, hey, listen, here's what I'm planning. Here's the things, the elements that I'm thinking about including. Does anyone have a problem with
Yeah.
this? I can amend to a certain point or whatever. But I think the best safety tools are the ones that are made up at the table themselves by the people playing. That way, because if you're playing with a certain group of people and it's going to be like you've been playing with them for 15 years, something might have changed, so you want to make sure that you're giving them the option to opt out of whatever. But also too,
Yeah.
if you know them and you've played with them for a long time, you're going to have a much deeper level of trust and a bond with them that maybe you would play with somebody at a convention game or something along those lines. So it's one of those things where it's like that's very important. And I think
Yeah.
that players should have agency as far as being able to do a little bit of like give your players a firm foundation and allow them to push back against the sort of rules should be flexible and be able to bend. If you're breaking rules, that's a problem. But I'm a world builder GM, like I said in the last episode, and I don't like the idea of in Dungeon World. It's like, oh, you're the cleric. You tell me how all the religions work in the world. That's not going to work for me. I have
Yeah.
a very specific idea of the world that I've crafted. And not that I'm lore dumping or anything else. I like to work off what I call the implied setting. Like when I used to play third edition, I there was this just you would read those books and you'd look at the aesthetic of the art and you'd look at the different, these are the deities that are available. Here's how, you'd read the book and you get a feel for how the universe worked, how the cosmology worked. Not you know,
Yeah.
just like the planes and everything else. Because like I never messed around with the planner stuff when I was jamming. But like, the cosmology of just
Yeah,
how
the
the
magic
actual world
items,
works.
the gods, the magic items, the items, they all inform the type of world or even like the description of the monster. So you assume these things
Yes,
exist in the world.
exactly.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when a player has the ability to shape that and warp that to their own whims, I'm like, this is not good for me. This is not like what I would like to do, because it's, as a world builder GM, I already have answers for all of that. I already have I built it out so you would be able to have that exploration of the world. And if everybody at the table is not on the same page, it's really going to, and finding 4 or 6 people or however many that are all on the same page about stuff, it's going to be very hard. So I think that, like, I think there was an old Facebook group called "How Dare This Group Have Rules," and one of my favorite jokes is "How dare this game have rules?" Where
Mm-hmm.
where it was like, we've all played with people where it's like, I can't believe that you would not allow me to do X, Y, and Z, and it's like, listen, we're all doing a shared delusion here that is generated by dice. Everybody needs to be somewhat on the same page. But when you give people those tools, when you give people those boundaries, they're able to build something within the confines of those boundaries. A lot of people, that's very liberating for people, and it's liberating for me as a player. If I know my boundaries, I'm going to test those boundaries as much as possible, but I want to collaborate. I want to make the game happen in a way that is exciting for everybody, and make sure that I'm not doing more than my part, but I'm always doing up to my part of the sort of social contract at the table. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. I would I
Yeah.
would I would try masks maybe as a player. I don't think I could run it as a GM. But yeah, I have yet to actually
Yeah.
play any superhero. That was a long tangent for a very simple question.
Yeah.
I apologize, Diogo.
But it's something I kind of want to get back to, as you're saying, like this is not something for you. Like you're not very fond of share the narrative where the players get to build something in your world, like, because you have this idea that you already has the idea of the world, uh, and then that's totally fine. That's I don't know. Have you ever heard about the MDA framework? Which is like
No,
it's mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetic. It's kind of a way to see game design, and there's different aesthetics of fun, things people look for in the games, and one of them is discovery. So if you're a player, you're not doing shared narrative. It's fun for some players. Really like discovering things, discovering the world the GM or the referee has created. So they don't want to collaborate and create their own stuff. They want to discover it little by little. That's something you probably enjoy as a player, or something that you want the players in your game to enjoy. Uh, but there is also another stat called expression. That's people expressing their own creativity. So if it's for players important that aesthetic, some games will cater to that need, to that want, and will let players create collaboratively. I think that's just different aspects of gameplay that you can explore in different games. I confess, I really like shared narrative stuff. As you were telling about D&D third edition, that you like all the feats, you like customization of the character, and I kind of like that too. Like if you see my games, and especially now Primal Quest and my recent games, they have all these tags and kind of aspects that the player can create themselves, but they function like fate aspects, which give you advantages and stuff. So it's kind of like feat, but it's way more open-ended. So you don't have like a list, you create your own, and they can create elements of the game. So if they say they're like, oh, I'm a warrior from the Red Bear tribe. So they established there's a Red Bear tribe, and we work with it together. I think it's just a different way to approach. Maybe you can design a world with a lot of open space. So you design the main themes, main regions, main factions, but there's a lot of it you don't know, and the players can insert this if that's important for them. But it's just a
yes,
different thing. But yeah, I understand the sentiment, and I know how people can enjoy different things. And if you'd like, I can send you links to the MDA stuff. It's very cool. Like you have this more notion, things you can focus and not, and you understand a little bit more why some games are not for you, because they cater to aesthetics of fun that you don't really care much about, you know.
Yeah, I well, as a jock of the RPG world, reading another game, no, thank you. I only make them.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no,
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 that's not another
please do
game.
send me.
That's like a game design kind of
Yeah, no.
document, you
I'm
know.
joking.
Yeah,
I was doing a bit. So, but
yeah,
no, me commit too hard to the bit? No way.
yeah, yeah,
No, yeah, but yeah, no. Please do send me that. I would love to read it.
yeah.
But yeah,
I'll put.
it's
I'll remember to put the links to the show note. I think everybody can benefit from it. It's a really nice way, and they try to explain how the mechanics of the game create dynamics, and these dynamics favor some type of some aesthetic. So, for example, they list like basic 8 ones with this sensation, which would be like the tactical things, like using different dice, like DCC RPG. They cater to the sensation aesthetic because they make weird new dice you can touch and can see and can play. Games that use miniature cater to this sensation too. There's obviously fantasy, imaginary world, things that are different, they're not real. The narrative aspect, people to create stories and stuff. There is also the aesthetic of challenge. So our star play really caters to that. We want games that are hard to beat, that you can just beat everything, just kill everyone, and it's done. So games that offer really challenge obstacles. So that's one of aesthetic. Another one is fellowship. So I think that one is almost universal for RPGs. We all like to play, not for solo games, but normal traditional RPGs. We all seek this fellowship. Our friends create something together and build something that we wouldn't be able to build by ourselves. There's the one that I said, expression, for you to express your own creativity, create stuff, create characters, places, and etc. And submission, which is basically I just want to get here and kill things, you know. So that can be that too, like hack and slash games or like, because it's not only for RPGs, games in general. Like I play Minecraft Dungeon with my kid, and it's fun. You just go there and kill things. You don't have to think very much, and it's just like you let go, you know. So once
yeah.
you're aware
Well, I
of
mean,
all
who
this,
doesn't?
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, who doesn't like, logging into Grand Theft Auto and just going wild for a little while,
Yeah, yeah,
just
and
I
for
mean, it's
yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. Just forget your troubles, go there and just uh lose yourself in the game. That's basically it. Uh
Yeah,
it's a
yeah. Well, I
cool
mean, that's the reason we play, right? Is
yeah.
to, there's a lot of different things that games can do. They can provide therapeutic experiences. They
Yeah.
can provide, but it's also too just like a stress reliever, where it's
Yeah.
like, you get to inhabit someone else, and you might get to play around with ideas about yourself that you normally wouldn't express. So I know a lot of people, have had their first experiences with like gender euphoria, playing a different character of a different gender, or
Wow.
playing a character that is more physically able, or a character that is less physically able, and starting to develop empathy through play, for maybe I'm playing a character, and maybe not necessarily, if you play a character of a different gender, that can be an experience for you, or it can not be. You're just, I would like
Yeah.
to play as a character, because when you play a female video game character, or I mean, a lot of binaries when I was coming up, where it was like, you had one option, maybe two options as far as
Yeah.
gender went. But especially with role playing games and stuff, that I think that's been kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
I think that that's very important to kind of like, you can look at those things, but ultimately, whether you're a storyteller gamer or a simulationist gamer or whatever it is, as long as you're at the table and having fun, it doesn't really matter what those things are. But then you have to figure out, do I like this, right? Do I like this
Yeah.
simulationist? Do I want to figure out how many torches I have, or how much gold I can
Yeah.
carry, or how much, X, Y, and Z?
And
Or
you
do I want to be like a hand wave that and just be like, well, I don't necessarily, we can do a more story based, thing. And as always, normally a hybrid is going to be the right answer. Of all,
Yeah.
of all that stuff, right? So
And you can want to play different things at different times. I want
yeah,
to play
sure, yeah,
DCC sometimes. I want to play Trophy Dark other times. I want to play more narrative stuff. And I love Fiasco. It's a completely narrative game. There is no stat, there is nothing. But it's such a great game. And I love more traditional games. I love Demon Ring. I love, it's every game I board this stuff in different ways. I think we don't have to, I just like this way. So yeah, it's just being able to, as you said, being empathy through play. One thing I sometimes say here is that games help us build new models for us to experience reality in a safer space, experience different ways to see the world in a safe space. That's what games do, right? They are like learning tools that allows you to see a different model of reality, of world through different lenses. And when we can play different characters, even these models that each game gives you, you can look them through different angles. And that helps you understand yourself better, the world better, the other person better, because you see how they are portraying themselves, their alter egos in this different world. So you learn, I don't know, social, how to behave, I think, how to see humanity in other people as you try to put humanity in the characters you create. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like the sort of experience of playing really allows you to have that kind of um uh I don't I I'm trying to express the thing here, but I kind of like I use the word experience once in the sentence, and I can't use it again. So
Yeah.
I work myself into a corner. I feel like Austin Powers here,
Yeah.
I allow myself to introduce myself.
Yeah.
But I think the experience of play is really cool because it like allows you to have that safe bubble. It's contained. You're in your head,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
you're allowed to kind of mold that, and you're
Take
not gonna
risks.
like
Yeah.
yeah,
You can take risks.
despite
Yeah.
what yeah, exactly. And it's like, despite what Jack Chick will tell you from the old Chick tracks, if your character dies in the game, you don't have to die in real life, right? So,
Yeah.
rest in peace, Blackleaf. But
Yeah.
like, it's one of those things where it's like, um, you have to kind of, think about what you're doing while you're playing. And I think that a lot of people, a lot of older gamers certainly really push back against the safety tools, but it's like you are opening yourself up and being vulnerable in a certain way. You're opening your mind, you're opening your heart when you play games, even if it is just you go into a dungeon and pound a bunch of goblins into hamburger. Like it's one it's one of those things where it's like you are accessing part of yourself that you don't normally do. You are accessing part of yourself, which I think is why so many people are sort of reticent to role play. And also, not to go on a whole nother tangent, but just to say real quick, that's the reason that I'm very anti, at least at my tables, people can do whatever they want at their own table, but I'm very anti like joke characters and joke campaigns. Like, there's enough levity at the table. It's going to, veer towards Monty Python itself. But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I just think that like you're so, when people, you have a
You disturb the
responsibility to
others. Yeah.
yourself,
You
yeah,
disturb
to
the
take it
others.
seriously,
Yeah.
to take it seriously. And you can have characters that are, have levity to them. You can have characters that have
Yeah.
gimmicks or jokes, and there's going to be jokes that come up at the table. But
Yeah.
no matter whatever tone you set for the table, it's going to devolve two steps, two rungs down on the ladder. So if
Yeah.
you're having a super serious, it's like, if you're playing like, the evils of Elmire or something, this, dark fantasy OSR thing that I was, very happy to work on. But like, I was reading through the material, and it's very, it's very rough stuff. But at the same point in time, I've listened to people talk about their Evils of Elmire campaign, where things legitimately funny things happen in this very grim, dark setting, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
like that's going to happen. because that is the nature of having fun with your friends. Things are going to get less heavy over time. So if you start off from if you're playing a gnome with, giant ears, and he talks like Sean Connery, and he, does all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, like, it's going to negatively impact your fun eventually. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's fine
Yeah.
if people want to play that way, but it's just like, it's not sustainable at a table. And I always try to run more seriously, where it's like I'll have goofy NPCs for them to interact with, and they can have fun interacting with those NPCs. But the tone of the game, I try to really keep into
Yeah.
a this makes sense, area. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think humor is it's a fantastic tool. I was watching the game design masterclass from Will Wright from Sin City, and he focused really on humor. He says uh, humor is a great solution to alleviate tension in game, like for failing, for death, for all this kind of stuff. But you can't abuse it because otherwise it derails the game. And as you were saying, like this comic names, I remember there's this guy here in Brazil that would go to all the gaming conventions, and he always make a character named Kakashi because he's an anime fan of something. So it's like you're playing a native Indian from Brazil in the mythological past, and his name is Kakashi. You would be playing like a medieval knight in Europe. He would name Kakashi. So it would break not only it breaks the fiction for everybody involved. I think it's kind of selfish, you know. Everybody here is trying
Yeah.
to have an experience with the themes, with the setting, within this imaginary world, and you're here constantly reminding them that it's all silly. It's not. Of course, we know it's
Well,
silly,
I
but
think
we want to pretend you're forcibly breaking our fiction, our disregard of reality. I forgot how the name we used to say, but it's that part that we forget reality. We're immersed in this game, and then comes this person, and then disrupts everything just because they think it's funny, and it's not, because it's forced. If it's always forced, it's not funny. It's more funny when there is contrast. If it's, as we're saying, we need contrast. We have to have something serious, but for when something funny happens, it's really funny. Because if it's funny all
yeah.
the time, it's not funny. You know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that again, it's kind of one of those things where you look at what people want out of an experience, and I think a lot of people that have been brought in to role playing games through Critical Role and things like the other sort of Dimension 20, and I won't even dare mention the McElroy brothers, which I dislike them so much that I shouldn't have even brought them up. I'm sorry to bring everybody down. But like but they had a role playing game, like one of the online, sort of things. But I think it's great that like they've brought them in. But like they always talk about like things like the Matt Mercer effect or whatever, and it's like people wanting to have that critical role experience. All of those people know each other and are high level actors and
Yeah,
improvisers. And so it's one of those things where it's like the tricks that they're able to do, or they're able to create characters that are a little bit more maybe silly or have certain aspects to them that are going to be, they're coming at it with a lot of tools in their toolbox. And if you're a new
yeah,
role player, you might not have those. And it's great to try to emulate those, but I think a lot of people that I've seen online are dissatisfied when they play role playing games because they're expecting it to be in a way like those sort of television shows that they watch, where it's like
yeah,
all of these people are at the top of their game. They're emotionally, have the tools to kind of turn off and turn on, and be able to do those things. And it's like that's the reason that, like, I think, like, as veteran role players or as game makers, or as if you're involved with RPGs and you've been in the space for a while, shepherding those people, mentoring those people, and being like, okay, like, here's the thing. But I think that, like, again, that goes back to tools at the table. where you provide, as a GM, my first goal is to provide those necessary sort of barriers so people have a safer bubble to kind of experience those things in. And if before, when I do session zero, I always, try to make sure that everybody knows what the limits of the setting are, what the limits of the thing are, because it's like, it's like this isn't, I have certain things that I want to convey to them, and they can feel safe in those things, and then that allows them to kind of like explore out. But I think like a lot of tables, even if you're just using bog standard safety tools, that's great. That's the bare minimum. But you
Yeah.
also kind of have to take that and think about not just for safety, but also for tone, also for the implications of the universe as far as like what is involved with that. If you have a fantasy setting, what heritage is, what people exist in this world, what people don't exist in this world, what the factions are, or the different things at play. That way, people are able to choose and say, oh, okay, well, I have an idea where I would like to be from a small village in the north that you've said this region up here, maybe whatever, you get them explaining all the different stuff. And it's like, I want to be from a small village in the north, and they'll, have worked harvesting grain or whatever, because that's the thing. And it's like, a lot of that stuff is boring, where it's like, you shouldn't like lore dump, because it doesn't matter what the sort of people do in your universe. But if you're making like a fantasy game, I always say like, here's what these people have, this sort of thing, this is their sort of aesthetic, this is the culture that they have, and then you use that as a jumping off point to make your character unique, make the place where you're from unique. You can have your own family or whatever, and characters can get really into that. And because I've always really felt nurtured and happy at the table when I was given the opportunity to do that, to have a conversation with the GM about where my character comes from. If you're playing a space game, it'd be like that's a much farther open. But you'd be like, could I be from a planet like X? Could I be from a planet like that had this, and then I was, this is how I want my character to function. And you have those conversations with your GM. That there's a lot of inherent stuff, and if you're doing that in a setting, in a session zero setting, it allows other people to kind of spark off your creativity, and actually creates deeper bonds for that sort of thing, where you can leapfrog off of one another. But the problem that I see a lot of times is people want that as soon as they open up the package, and it's like you have to have a GM that can sort of do that. But the only way to get there is to actually do it. So you're gonna have, if you're a new GM and you're just running for your game for somebody for the first time, just do your best, and you're going to keep getting better and better and better. So it's like, but it's like if you're a veteran player, you have the obligation to kind of shepherd people in the correct way to kind of get them to where they would want to be and make them feel safe at the table. I said a lot of things there. It was kind of a word salad. I apologize for that.
Yeah, it's a complex topic, and of course.
Yeah.
Hello, weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira, and I'm back with a word from our sponsors. Me. I just released a new game called Cosmosaurus, in which you play a dinosaur space ranger who protects the galaxy from evil threats such as slime bankers, undead pirates, and Cosmosaurus from a void dimension. It's a game with a runes-light system inspired by Forged in the Dark and Lasers and Feelings. It comes with a bunch of tables for you to generate content for it. If you know my games, they're really easy to play, and they have tools to help you improvise and play with low prep. It's an ideal game for one-shots, short campaigns, and introducing new people to the hobby, and it's a really perfect family game. I play with my kids all the time. It's a game inspired by Saturday morning cartoons. It's really well illustrated by Lucas Kowalski from Poland, and with a great layout by Guilherme Gontijo. It's a really fun game. You should check it out on DriveThruRPG, itch.io, or exclusively in print on exaltedfurniture.com. I have many other games there, check them out. All the links are in the show notes, so click there. And let's get back to Weird with our chat. If everybody would work together and have this more collective, social intelligence to help everybody out, would be easier. But I have the impression this job usually comes to the GM, right? And sometimes the GM isn't so, you know, social socially evolved to have all this to orient everybody. So that's where the safety tools come in. And I know they're more generic and they're on fit for every group, but you start to experiment with them and see how they can help. And some of them even have this kind of routine for you to ask what kind of themes we want to aboard, what kind of things we don't want to aboard, what kind of genre and kind of characters and plots would be interesting. I think that's kind of the stuff we're telling, like, well, how serious you want to be, how goofy, and do we want to deal with sexual stuff or no? Oh, is that what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's it's one of those things where it's like I normally come to the table with, when I'm running, because most of the time I run games. And my thing is always here's my as a GM, my limits. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I tell the people that I'm playing with, I'm not going to, if you're looking for something that's like,
yeah,
something that's going to be more romance heavy or something that's a little bit more blue, I'm not I'm not the guy for that. I don't, you know, I don't have any problem with people who are into that kind of thing, but like I personally don't
yeah,
feel comfortable at the table with that. So I'm not going to include those in my games. Here's how I'm going to
yeah,
handle that. If there's, like I'm not going to go through long, drawn out
yeah,
romance sequences in a game where that's not really the goal of it. And I normally don't make that the goal of it. But, I mean, if
sure,
you're
yeah,
going to interact with the world, there's always going to be that, you know, it's not that
sure,
you
yeah,
can't, it's just
yeah,
that we're going to gloss over it.
yeah.
And
But
it's going to be very, whatever. And yeah, and it's like, but I think that like a lot of times those sort of things, it's like, do you have in your campaigns, do you have things like people who are looking to capture people and enslave them and put them into,
yeah,
go work in the mines? That was always like a big fantasy trope. And it's like, are people
yeah,
going to feel uncomfortable about that? I think that it's like, there's a lot of different stuff at the table. But for me, if there's any kind of like disagreement about that or anything else, I'll try to amend at my table, whatever. Because like I'm not like, I like to make my villains villainous, but I also don't want to make anybody uncomfortable with that. And it's
yeah,
never going to be, an assault situation. It's never going
yeah,
to be a other than, maybe with swords or clubs or knives or something, in that sense, where it's like they
yeah,
might try to kill you and they might try to capture you, but like, it's one of those things where it's like, I like to have elements that are, but like, it's a fantasy. You don't have to have, it doesn't have to have any basis in real world thing. It can almost be like, I always say that like my preferred style is like Saturday morning action, right? So it's like high adventure and kind of like more like Saturday morning,
yeah.
something from like the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, or
Thundar the Barbarian.
yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah,
like in those they deal with stuff where it's like the heroes might get captured, the heroes might get
yeah,
whatever, but it's never like they lean too heavily and it's like, oh, they've captured my loved ones, but it's never like there's an intense romance sequence other than maybe a
yeah,
kiss on the
yeah,
cheek or
yeah,
whatever, a quick kiss or
yeah,
whatever. It's like that kind of stuff is fine. Princess
yeah,
Bride, think of like
yeah,
that, something along those lines, where it's
yeah.
like,
Of
yes, that
course.
deals
Yeah,
with love and romance, but at the same point in time, you don't really have that sort of deep,
yeah. That's in the
what I'm looking.
background. That's like
Yes,
motivation
exactly.
stuff, but it's not
It's a
like the main focus. You're not gonna try like close up in the scenes and stuff. That's what motivates the characters. Yeah, yeah, I get it.
right.
And
Yeah.
that's a nice way to do too. Like as a GM, you can get to your group, say, "Oh, here's how my games run. So these are the options, the themes I touch. These are the kind of plots that happen. This campaign will feature a lot of undead. We'll be focusing on this and this and doing that. And that can be a nice. And if players don't like this, they can just choose another GM or even suggest something. But of course, the GM has also to be comfortable with the stuff he's running. And then of course we can't force the GM. Oh, we don't care about this. Hodag, we're gonna run for us a game about, I don't know, romance in the high school, and of course that can't work, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and also too, it's you bring up a really good point there too. Letting people know not only what's possible in your universe, but also what corner of the universe you're going to be setting
Yeah.
things in. Because if
What
I
is
build
the
a,
themes
if I
the themes you
exactly,
like, yeah, the regions,
yeah,
the kind
because
of problems they will be facing, you know.
right. Because if it's like, oh, I'm building I want to play a character that's a very charismatic bard character, and he's got, a lute, and I'm going to put all of my points into, making sure that he has a lot of
Yeah.
social connections and everything else. And then we play a game where you're marching through the desert.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Or
not
it's
going to
there's a
work.
dungeon. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, or you're stuck in a dungeon and you're
Yeah.
not interacting with
Yeah.
anybody except for
Yeah. You
dead
create a
people and
pirate.
monsters.
You create a pirate, and we're going to play just dungeon crawls. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not going to work. It's not going to work out. But
Yeah.
also too, I think that that's the reason that like I would say that like it's good to vary from thing to thing. Also, something that
Yeah.
I've always thought about is like the more episodic nature of role playing games, where you have like a weekly game where you're like, if you watch a TV series, like I just recently got into Xena Warrior Princess, hadn't seen any of it, and
Yeah.
so I just started watching it, and so we're watching Xena, and I'm watching, and I'm thinking, okay, look at the aesthetic of this. This is perfect, but it's also too. It's they took a lot of cues from the third edition Dungeons and Dragons. They took a lot of like inspiration from Xena. It looks like a lot of the aesthetics, the sort of leather and gold, and the way that they like
That's
craft
true.
weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm watching. I'm like, this is great. It's like third edition, the TV show. But it came out
Yeah.
before, and so I'm watching it. But like the idea of like the episodic fantasy adventure where you can
Yeah.
have your characters in between
Yeah.
the sessions that you do have that downtime, and you don't need to go into, okay, well, this episode we're going into a dungeon that has like a frost wizard in it, and he's got a bunch of icy skeletons, and the next time you could be traveling, like you just
Yeah.
join in media res
That's like Conan
different,
stories, like
yeah,
the sword and sorcery
yes,
stories are usually like that. Like every new
yeah, is
short tale, they are somewhere else doing something. It's already
right.
happening. They already have a problem, and that problem can go away or can get bigger, or something like this. Yeah,
Right. And you pick
that's
up a
excellent.
Conan
Yeah.
book and you're like, is he a thief? Is he a king? Is he
Yeah.
a warlord? Is he what's going on? But he's like always constantly having these different roles. And I think that maybe if we like start like looking at our characters like that, having a different like perspective of like things are going to change from time to time, but there's always a consistent thread through the thing where it's like you don't have to, it's just like comic books where it's like, when I was growing up, they were moving more towards the unspooled sort of I forget what the word is, but the long form storytelling where everything took place in like 6 issue arcs, right? So you'd have to read issues 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 all in order for you to get the full story. And when I was younger,
Yeah.
I used to read a lot of like Silver Age and Golden Age reprints, where it was like you read a Golden Age comic, you get self-contained stories, 3 or 4 self-contained stories in one book. Silver Age, usually it's just one story per book, but you would get a story that you could just pick up, reread, go through, and each issue had its own continuity, or not own continuity, but like internal continuity, where it was like you didn't need to read any of the other comics because they would explain to you things that you needed to know about the character in the comic itself, and then you wouldn't have to, you could just pick it up off the stands and have an entirely self-contained thing. But nowadays comic books are really like going for making those trade paperback collections, so you have like issues 1 through 6 and maybe some additional material, but they want to be able to sell those trade paperbacks, so
Yeah.
they have the sort of like longer form storytelling. But it's like if we went back to having or not, if we started telling stories at our tables that were self-contained, that way it would make sense. And if someone can't make it at your table for any reason, you're not involved in these extra plots, to kind of you like have a West March style table, but with the people that you normally play with, where it's like each adventure is contained and it's its own thing. I think maybe a lot more people would be better off that way, right? So I don't know. I guess just figure out, but that's definitely an option.
I was muted. I actually have a weird game idea that touches on this, and the idea would be every session of it's a urban setting game, like in like kind of Lankmar or Ankh Park, and which every session would be just one night in the game, and your character, whoever shows up, it's there that night. We can do stuff. We can rob someone. We can, you know, do this kind of roguish urban crawl kind of adventure. And when the session ends, the sun rises and you have to get back to your day job or whatever. Like every character, like it's a cool game. And the name of the game is Petty Gods and Playthings. So
Oh, okay.
you are a god in the game. So that's that. It has a little bit of that things you don't like the shared narrative, because every player will create a minor god, like a petty god. So you can be god of procrastination, god of I don't know anything you can imagine, and you begin the game with very little influence. Like and the XP track, it's like the Street of the Gods. So you begin like in the very beginning with just a small shrine and very little followers, but you have a plaything, a mortal. So you create a normal character too, like an adventure or something. And this adventure has a day job that they do during the day. They are not there, and it's like his secret identity. They have their essence, which is when this minor god touches their mortal soul. Uh, they can't fit in normal society anymore, so they have a destiny, something they can become, and they have also a doom, something that can happen to them that's terrible. And all these little things. So you play as a player, as you spend points to do this and that, you're actually the god doing the stuff in the game. So even the meta game is kind of diegetic. So all the players are these gods controlling these mortals in the city, and the GM is also the overlord of the city. So if any player with their plaything take over the city, they have to become the GM.
Interesting. Yeah, that's wild. I
Yeah,
I hadn't heard of that before, but it sounds fun. I definitely I
yeah,
try it. I'll
and
try any game once. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like I
and
even I've played some
the
pretty bizarre ones.
the XP will not be from the character, it will be from the god. So it would be like a divine spark or something you can use to either evolve your character or evolve your faith. You can buy a church or a cathedral, or you can convert someone influence, and you can spend points to making small interventions, but not too big, because the real powerful gods wouldn't want these small gods interfering with their world. So every time you spend the points to make a divine interference, you risk calling attention to yourself from the bigger and more controlling gods.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds really fun.
yeah. And I already have the cover. That's what I do. I hire people to make a cover, and so I spend a lot on this, so I have to write this eventually. So,
Wait,
yeah.
hold on. You're telling me you came up with that game?
Yeah,
Diego, I thought the way you were talking about it, I thought this is a game that you would play. That's incredible.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No wonder you have such a good lock on what's going on in that game. You made it.
Yeah, it's well,
Yeah,
it was an idea I had. Yeah, it's kind
yeah,
of
yeah. No,
evolved from Primal Quest. Yeah, sorry.
I'll make games. People will ask me for clarifications on things. Like, I don't know. I made the game. It's out of my hands. It's your problem now. You
Yeah,
figure it out. If there's once I've drawn something, once I've created, I always tell I was telling Josh McCrall of oh gosh the Joshy McCrew on but anyways he and I were working on Ringless together, which is sort of a Tolkien-esque fantasy game. And So, but he's making His Majesty the Worm right now, so that's kind of on
Yeah.
pause. But I was telling him, I was like, once we've made a game, or once I've made a game, it's out of my hands. I've already completed it. It's out in the world. So, sometimes I'll go back through and, like, if there's something particularly egregious or it says something that is just completely factually wrong and ruins the game, I'll try to, like, go back and, like, but, like, once the game's made, it's done. In my And so it's just kind of like it's out there in the world. So it's no longer my problem because, again, I sort of access that more creative space. And then once I'm out of that creative space, I could not tell
Yeah.
you how to play the games that I make. They make sense while I'm making them. And usually I'll, like, double check them to make sure that there's some kind of continuity in there that people can follow. But, like, once they're done, I have no idea. They've completely left my mind, and I will not be able to tell you anything about them because
Uh,
I've accessed a different place and they come from somewhere else and I just channel them. So, you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but I was sitting there and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I'll have to pick that up, or, play a game. And then you're like, I made it. I was like, ah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, no,
I just have the notes for it for now. Like I'm playtesting it.
oh,
It's the
okay.
same system as Primal Quest,
Well,
but do some things a
okay.
little bit different, and I want to develop it bigger. I commissioned a cover to encourage me to actually write it. That's one of
Hmm.
my creative hacks. Is you want to make something, pay someone to make a really good cover for it. So you spend some money and you look at it and think, oh, now I have to write this thing because I spent $500 on this. So yeah,
Oh, make a game worthy of it. Make a game
yeah,
worthy of
yeah,
the art that has been created. So,
exactly. Yeah, I have two games like this. I have this Petty Gods and Playthings, and I have another one inspired by philosophy and stoicism that I hired an artist and made like a cool cover, and it's waiting there for me to tackle as soon as I have some time. And do you have any kind of weird game idea that you had but you couldn't implement it yet? Like, do you have any really weird out of the box thing you want to do but you were not able to do it yet?
I've got my heartbreakers, obviously. I'm still working on 20 Dag, which is sort of the has elements of Hodag, the heroic original dice adventure game, has elements of third edition, kind of like not the actual mechanics of third edition, but like the feeling I had while I was playing third edition Dungeons and Dragons. Like I was trying to, like, recapture that. And it's a little
Yeah.
bit more in line with the thing. I've got a heartbreaker that is called Space's End, and it's been up on my itch page forever, and it's like a sort of a coming soon, which is a lie because it's not coming soon. I'm going to be working on it forever. But
Yeah.
Space's End is a series of more hard sci-fi. Like I originally, when I was envisioning Space's End, it was this very weird, like, um permutation. It started off with the idea that I had when I was a kid about what the Clone Wars were, and in Star Wars, you'd hear about the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi fought the Clone Wars, blah blah. And then I was like, what if, in my head I was picturing, like, World War I or World War II with lightsabers, and it was, obviously it was a space thing, right? And that's kind of what Star Wars is, anyways. But, like, I was like, I in my head I was thinking more like trench combat, like hardcore warfare on a planet. Like the Clone Wars all took place in this planet, and it was, a lot like World War I, where it was like, they were fighting over this no man's land and all this other stuff. And then that sort of harder, more militaristic universe kind of, like, gave way to a universe that was very not hard sci-fi, but had the trappings of hard sci-fi, or not hard sci-fi, but like industrial sci-fi. So, like, basically the idea is there's this anomaly, this sort of interspatial eddy, where people get stuck there when they're traveling through hyperspace from other universes and other multiverses and timelines and things. They get stuck in this, but basically one way portal that kind of is caused by this uh, uh, reverse black hole called Lumos the Great Dive, that is sort of the space anomaly that has this it's very kind of trading on those like ideas of like 1970s sci-fi, where it's like more industrial. It's almost like Alien meets Diner at the End of the World, Douglas Adams meets 90s Star Wars EU novel, meets like all this other ideas that really informed it. But basically, there it's like, so they get stuck in this place. And actually that comes from I used to have in one of my houses that I lived in, I had this border that I found that was all planets. And I was like, oh, it's cool. I was like, like one looked like Saturn and one looked whatever. And I had it up in this sort of little area that was sort of my workspace when I was in high school in Sheboygan. And I put it up with tape, and the tape ripped off part of the actual image of the planets. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I named all the planets, because I was like, oh, this is gonna be like, I'm just going to name all these planets and I'll use it for like a space game, like later on, And so, because even then, in my first years of role playing, the first thing that I wanted to do was world build. I wanted to make my own universe. I want to make my own games immediately after learning how to play. And so, but I ripped off part of it, and I noticed that like the white patches of like where the image had come off, I was like, it'd be interesting if that was some kind of space anomaly, right? So basically, Space's End is, long story short, you get sucked in through these sort of space eddies, and it's this sort of like uh, island of inner space island where there's 26 planets that are in kind of in this, that have gotten sucked into this sort of anomaly that all revolve around this sort of anti-black hole that has this sort of weird radiation. And so like the people that work on the ships, they'll like get energy because it creates energy, but like when they work on the ships, they basically become mutants because they have like that was one of the ideas that I had, where they're like, like harnessing this energy, but when they work on these ships, the radiation that comes off of it kind of makes them like more mutated. And so, and it's like kind of a hard scrabble galaxy, like a lot like Star Wars, more industrial, type thing. So anyways, long story short, Space's End coming never. But like it's one of those things that keeps me going and keeps my mind turning in the back of my head, and it's gone through so many permutations. And I've had characters that exist on this like hard sort of like dark sun type planet, what called Diostar, and there's Morningstar, the last Pell, and he's this like intergalactic warlord that kind of has a very, he's big and green and has this, and I've drawn all these characters out, and it's just like yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of like thoughts and ideas that I've poured into this setting that may never
Yeah.
see the light of day, but that's my heartbreaker. That's the big one that I'm gonna produce someday. And
Yeah.
it's and but now the further I get into game making, the more I realize that all of those big ideas, I'm gonna have to squeeze those into a book. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
take those ideas and make them playable. And is that a game? Is that a game that I have these NPCs for? Is it a story? Is it, what is it? But yeah. So I mean, that's like the weirdest thing that I can think of is my sort of Space's End, which I just haven't um uh uh literally the end of space, where
Yeah.
all these sort of weird things. And I don't know. So it's almost Guardians of the Galaxy, like but I probably talked about that for way too long. I apologize to the listening audience. But
Yeah. It's no worries. You don't have
yeah.
to apologize. It's great. I mean, Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells were my Solar Blades Cosmic Spells was born out of wanting to make like a dark sun in space. So it's
Mm,
it's kind of like
that's awesome.
something in this sense. But why don't you try to make any like the minimal viable version of it just for us to see? You don't have to make like oh, I know you have this idea that I made something, it's done, I'm gonna move to the next. But wouldn't you want to like make something small for it and then you will build space ends as it grows, or you really want to make like something big and just have it ready, or you have no plans of ever finishing it for real?
Yeah, I think that that's the one that if I ever did do like a Kickstarter, I'd get like a group of people together and be like, here's I'm gonna spearhead this, but here's what I need everybody, to help me with. And I would do if I were to do that, I would do like a big like Kickstarter type thing. That would be like a big like, something I could put on my shelf that is like the other role playing books, right? That is like
Yeah,
the codexes of my youth. I think that that's the goal of that one.
yeah,
Although that said, making a playtest version is not a bad idea, right? But
yeah, yeah.
I've got a
An
ton of other games.
S conversion, I don't
Yes,
know.
yeah. Which a lot of times I'll do anyways. Like, when I
Yeah,
was developing a lot of my stuff, like I'll just release ashcan stuff of like I
yeah,
Beneath the Dungeon Floor had an ashcan. I'm trying to think of like Beyond the Hyper Trench had a ashcan. So I'll make that way people can kind of like download it, look at what the material is, and then be able to like figure out what's playing. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. Also, I recently have been thinking a lot about GI Joe, um, and the ideas behind that. Kind of like it's something that I just I grew up like playing with other people's toys that they had at their houses, and I didn't have many GI Joes growing up. But I've that's something that I didn't know a lot about. And a few years ago, I got really into Masters of the Universe because I didn't know a lot about it. And then I started reading about it. I was like, oh, this is really neat. And so I've been like
yeah,
looking at a lot of like GI Joe stuff, and I kind of like really like the idea of. I think that that would be very those more toyetic properties that are you're able to think about like a quote unquote like international peacekeeping force or whatever. But it's like I think that like the GI Joes how they function is kind of like they don't actually deal with military operations. They're dealing with sort of like personal small team assaults on like bunkers of like the bad guy, like the Cobra bad guys, right?
yeah. Special
I'm like, that's
forces kind of stuff. Yeah,
right, yeah, that's perfect for a role playing game. And I
yeah,
know that they already have like GI Joe role playing games and things of that nature, but I think that like it might be interesting because I had an idea for a superhero game that was kind of like based off like I think it was I was going to build it out in either Beneath the Dungeon Floor or another system that I was kind of thing, but it was like superheroes and it was kind of based off the old because like a lot of like my games are based off of old toys that I love. So, like Beyond the Hyper Trench was literally, my love of the old Star Wars and Power for the Force 2 figures. A lot of my games are, I did Accelerated Warlords and Wise Men that was based off the old LJN Dungeons and Dragons line. So I draw a lot of inspiration from toys because I love action figures. And I had this uh, Secret Wars action figures, and I was like, it'd be fun to do kind of like all of these with like the serial numbers filed off, and look at the different bases
yeah,
and vehicles that they had, and then it was like so it's like assault on Castle von Glaum, which was the sort of like Doctor Doom-esque character that I had created with elements of Darth Vader and a few other things. And basically, you'd have to go rescue whatever heroes you weren't playing would be spread out through this dungeon, basically this electro dungeon. And the big evil bad guy has these superheroes locked up in his castle, and you have to go through the castle and save all these other heroes. But whatever heroes that you don't play with, that you don't choose to as your characters to inhabit while you're playing the game, then go into the dungeon as the people that are captured. And so I never quite got that one to work. So eventually I need to do that. But I was thinking about doing something along those lines for a GI Joe game, and also too, it would just be fun. I remember one of the last things that Ursa Minor and I did before he passed was that we were working on on like fake GI Joe stuff. So
Hmm.
his character was H2O yeah, and H2O yeah was he had the water he had with a water wagon vehicle. That had like the potable water that
Yeah.
for you get thirsty, when you're fighting these
Yeah,
things.
of
And
course.
my character was called Snack Pack, and he had the chuck wagon, which was the food. So it was the food and water vehicles. But anyways, so we kind of created self insert characters for this GI Joe thing. But like that's always stuck in my mind of like it would be so fun to come up with like fun names. And I think that like, again, like you could take the game seriously, but if it's a Saturday morning cartoon style action, you can have those funny little names and it's not going to break the immersion as opposed
Yeah.
to when you're in a fantasy game, if you're playing a wizard
Yeah.
named Gandalf or
Yeah.
Gan,
Yeah. You're playing Middle
Gan,
Earth. Yeah.
yeah,
If you're playing in a
Gandork or
setting,
whatever.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Gendork,
going to
yeah.
be different than if you're,
Wow.
a military operative named, Neon Leon or something like that. I don't know. So,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
I
It
guess it's all
varies the
about the setting.
spirits, yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah,
varies the
exactly,
spirits of the
exactly.
game, yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I had an idea, but I forgot. I had a question, but oh yeah, about things you take inspiration from. And see you mentioned a lot about toys and cartoons and comics, and for me, I sense that a lot of things that inspire me to do my games and my art has a lot of to do with things that I loved as a kid in my childhood. It's something that has some emotional comfort to me, I would say. Like you see Cosmosaurus, you see Primal Quest, you have dinosaurs, you have cartoons, Lost in the Fantasy World inspired by the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, all this kind of stuff and the things you're saying. So what I would like to ask is about your childhood. Do you have good memories of your childhood, and do you see this as a source of inspiration for your work?
Um, yeah, I had a pretty rough childhood actually. I won't get into it, not here. But
Sure.
yeah, I definitely, it's all built off the bones of escapism, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly
uh,
here. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
These were
yeah.
my
The
refuge. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And when I was a kid, my reality wasn't necessarily the best. Farm life is hard, and there's other things that go into that. But it's one of those things where, I was very lonely as a child. I did not have the
Yeah.
type of interactions that I wanted to have with people, and I even felt disconnected from when I was attending public school. Um, I went to public school, I went to a private school, and I was also homeschooled. So I got the full gamut, of those experiences. But when I was homeschooled and living on the farm, things were very lonely. It was a lonely time in my life, and situations weren't the best, and a lot of sort of rough stuff happened, and it was just kind of one of those things where it's like
Yeah. These
I
things were our friends, like the characters on the cartoon
yeah, exactly,
was
yeah,
kind
and
of
it's
our
like, and
friends. We felt
I
safe
would
with these things. Yeah.
I would start building, mind palaces, I guess. But like, you could, you could start internalizing those things. But I think that made me a more well-rounded adult when I actually got out into a space where I could interact with people because then I was, first of all, it was like I was a lot more gregarious because I was like I had no one to talk to, and I'm a very personable person, or person who enjoys other people, and I was just like, you can't stop me now from interacting with people. I'm going to interact with everybody on Earth, and I'm going to try to make everybody my friend. And but like
Yeah.
having those deep sort of roots of being able to build things out of nothing, build stories and adventures and ideas in your head about different stuff, and The Hobbit and Ivanhoe, and I watched a lot of I don't know if in Brazil if it was brought down there, but there was a TV show called Wishbone, and it was about a dog that told you about old classic literature stories,
No,
and
I
I was
don't think
introduced
so.
to a
Yeah.
lot of like classic literature through that. So like Three Musketeers and Ivanhoe and a lot of that different stuff, and that always like fascinated me. Those different like every episode they would tell a different, the very basic story of a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court or whatever it was, and it would be, but the dog was the main character. But like it was like, or he would portray the main character. But it was like that introduced me to a lot of different like things, and I watched a lot of PBS growing up and stuff like that. So it was kind of like I didn't have access to a lot of the stuff, and then I had to go back and like catch up a lot. It's like I got to watch the first season of Power Rangers, but then I had to stop watching that because it was like deemed like inappropriate. I had to like really kind of like sneak watching Batman the animated series. That was and I had to like sneak around and kind of like the stuff that I was interested in. I
Yeah.
always had to kind of like not necessarily keep hidden, but like I just didn't have a lot of the opportunities. So when I got the opportunity, I was very excited to do it. And so it was one of those situations where I started building out those ideas. And I think later on that was fertile ground for me to kind of like shape it into game, shape it into illustration, shape it into. I loved reading books as a kid. I loved looking at
Yeah.
especially like old illustrations or anything that was like, and a lot of it, a lot of the reason I like the black and white art is because I read a lot of those older books with like the old print, the very thin line work, beautiful illustration stuff, and that kind of I think really captured my imagination a lot of the time. So, but yeah, I mean, based off the things that I liked during my childhood and the things that I didn't have access to in my childhood, that now as an adult, I can go back and say, yes, I'm going to learn everything about
Yeah.
G.I. Joe. I'm going to learn everything about Thundercats. I'm going to learn everything about, and I was always a big Star Wars kid, but now it's like I have unlimited access to that. And I'm gonna,
Yeah.
just enjoy that and revel in that, So,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
get
to
it.
answer your
Yeah.
question, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel much like the same way. I mean, probably we had different issues, but I mean, yeah, I felt lonely. I was hit as a kid, and now I'm investigating. They probably have autism and stuff, so I was kind of weird and a kind of outsider. And pop culture, cartoons, comics, and toys were really a safe space. It was where I felt more free to imagine and to be who we are, right? I don't know, and and,
yeah. No,
and
listen,
that
I
built
yeah, I
me a great emotional ties to these things, and now I think my imagination is tied to them, and when I create stuff, this always come really strong for me as an something that I don't know speaks to me. I think. Yeah, those old cartoons like the DD cartoons,
yeah,
Thunder the
and I think that when you
Barbarian. Yeah.
that I had never seen the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon until last year. I
Oh
started
yeah.
watching it because I just didn't have access to it, and I was like, oh, this is interesting that they made a D&D cartoon. But I like, and I heard things, and I was like, oh, it's kind of goofy, but it's pretty fun. I watched it and I fell in love
It's
with
great. Yeah.
all of those characters, and I think that like it's like you have all of this like stuff, and I'm like, this is so incredible, and the way that it functions, they have like, okay, I recognize that, but I never I they would introduce new characters, and it was like Decon, sort of Skeleton Knight, and things like it's like I'd seen pictures of a hook horror before, but it was so cool to see that in the cartoon, or oh, what the one that has plants for hands, but it was like all of these other the different monsters, the classic monsters, the classic, but then also too just the very gentle way that like it's like these teams interacting with each other, and then having, oh, excuse me, the
Oh,
very the very gentle wisdom of the dungeon master. It's such a charming TV show. I love it,
Yeah.
and no wonder that like people in Brazil are like the biggest fans. Like it was huge down there,
Yeah.
and so it's like whenever you look at fan spaces for it, like I started going into fandom spaces for it, and they were just like, and it's just like 90% Brazilian people because they love it. In fact, there was a TV commercial for a car
Yes.
down there that was
Yes.
only for Brazil that where they brought
Yeah.
back the characters. But to many
Yeah.
people, especially from what I understand, the people of Brazil love the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
incredible. That's so neat.
Yeah.
So, which
I
I
have
mean,
the
like
DVDs
that's
here to show my kids. I bought the
oh
DVDs
really?
like a couple of months ago. Yeah, and I bought Tundar and Herculoids too, but those haven't arrived yet. But the
Oh
old
yeah,
D&D cartoon they have, yeah.
Thundar, and that was like what Akla the Mock and or Ukla the
Yeah.
Mock. What was it? Yeah,
Ukla,
and
yeah. Ukla, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then Herculoids had the oh, I only saw it on there used to be a TV channel called Boomerang that was a spinoff of the
Yeah.
Cartoon Network, and they would
Yeah, yeah.
show the different, and I think like that one had the dinosaurs that could shoot like rocks out of their sort of like horns, right? Like there was something with the Herculoids, and there was like a
Yeah,
big goop
Herculoids,
creature.
Herculoids, yeah,
Yeah,
Herculoids.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. They yeah,
So
they seems like a good inspiration for Primal Quest, and someday I want to do something like Thundar the Barbarian, like the Barbarians of the Future Past or something.
yeah, oh
So
yeah, that would
yeah.
be awesome. Well, if
Yeah.
you, I'll throw my hat into the ring right now. If you want to get together and do that, I'd love to do some artwork
Yeah.
for it because
Uh,
I love nothing. Nobody loves future past stuff more than I do.
yeah,
Jack
it's great.
Kirby's
Yeah. Yes,
oh, what
yes.
was it?
Kamandi. Kamandi.
Commandy, yeah,
Yeah.
Commandy, the last hero, and they also had
Yeah.
Anthro, the first hero in DC Comics, which was sort of like he was just a regular caveman, and then they
Yeah.
had Commandy,
Yeah.
who was the last caveman. So,
Yeah.
which there was recently a movie that came out, and it was from the DC animation, and I can't remember what the name of it was. I think it was maybe a John Constantine thing, where he was like trapped between worlds or something like that. But they had two extra cartoons on it. One was the Charlton Blue Beetle that was kind of in the style of the 1960s, 67 Spider-Man, which was really interesting. And they also had a Jack Kirby, like the animation looked like Jack Kirby for
Wow.
Commandy, and it was really interesting,
Yeah, that
and it
must
was
have
really
been
good.
cool. Yeah.
So, but yeah, yeah. Well, if you want to get together, Diogo, we'll do it. We'll do it. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
do want to, but I have to finish the things I have started now. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because
You can
otherwise,
start one
yeah,
more thing. You could
yeah,
do it.
no, no, I can't.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Those intrusive thoughts. Keep doing it. Keep doing it.
yeah,
Keep making it.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
I cannot tell you how many drafts I have saved on my phone of
Oh yeah, I mean,
different. Yeah,
yeah, I
but
can't
just
start another one. I have to finish
yeah,
something, and well,
yeah.
I finished one
So
thing. I finished a small commission adventure for Don Stroud for his Renations of Pilgrimage RPG. It's really kind of cool, like this horror, religious horror kind of role playing. Feels kind of Diablo or something with
oh,
horror
cool,
and the
interesting.
Mothership first edition system. It's really cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I did when I did that zine game that I made, the Dungeon 80. I did a Diablo-esque expansion for it called
Oh,
D97 that was a
nine.
reference to Diablo. I love that. Yeah, I love playing the original Diablo. Uh,
Yeah.
so much so that sounds really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I wanted to make a solo RPG kind of Diablo that would go to the cathedral and then afterwards the graveyard and then the catacombs, and as you progress, you'd reach hell someday. I actually started writing, but I didn't finish. That's one of the draft that's unfinished here. It's the Into the Abyss would be the name of the game.
Ooh, yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
fun. That sounds
yeah.
awesome.
I love Diablo 2. I used to play, especially the Diablo 1 and 2. I tried to play three
Yeah.
a little bit, but then like after 2 weeks, I was like, oh, okay. I'm done.
I tapped out after Diablo 1. I was trying to play Diablo 2 and I was like, there's a run meter? What's going on here? And then I was like
Yeah,
it was already too complicated in this fucking permutation. It was
yeah,
just I like Diablo 1 the point and click where you
yeah.
yeah.
I
But
I just I just installed StarCraft 2. Do you like StarCraft?
ah no, I wasn't a big computer game player.
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't have
yeah,
access to a computer until I was an adult, so it was, one of
yeah.
those things where it was like, I got to play Diablo at friends' houses and things like that. But and I guess my
Diablo's great.
grandpa had a
Yeah,
computer that I played Diablo on. But yeah,
yeah,
I never got into any of that stuff. I had cousins and my friends were all into, the Warcraft 3 and
yeah,
StarCraft and but I also too, again, being, artists really are the jocks of the RPG world. But I was
yeah,
never smart enough to play any sort of Command and Conquer or any of the either turn based or real time
yeah.
strategy. I was always like, what's really great is when the guy from Doom has a gun and he goes around and shoots the bad guys. That's neat. So I
Yeah,
I was always more of that. I honestly I love fighting games. That's what my favorite like
yeah.
one because you can
What's
just
your favorite fighting game?
probably Injustice. Like obviously being a big DC fan, I was like huge into that.
Ah,
I love Mortal Kombat. I love Mortal Kombat. Street Fighter is fine. I like Street Fighter 2 a lot. That was like really popular when I was a kid. So obviously like, I played a lot of
yeah.
that. I
I
played a
love
lot
it
of
the Marvel versus Capcom ones because it's so
oh yeah,
fast
yeah,
and
yeah. I
so
had I had that on the PlayStation.
chaotic. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'd be like, who's Onslaught? Who's because I love comics and I have a working knowledge of Marvel, but
yeah.
I wasn't
I'm
like
not.
as up on
Yeah,
Marvel stuff. So I was always like, like, oh, who's this character? You
yeah.
know?
I'm not very into DC. I'm more into Marvel. I don't know much about DC. I mean,
Oh,
I don't know much about Marvel
the
too. But I mean,
yeah.
the movies and stuff. I like that DC, the TV series are really good. But for me, the movies,
Yeah.
I think they take themselves too seriously sometimes, and it can't
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean,
kind of.
it's. I would like something that I'm pretty excited about James Gunn's, upcoming kind of hybrid where it's going to be, fun, and maybe he's taking it seriously, but it's going to be a little bit more a
Yeah,
lighter approach. I didn't hate the Snyder movies. I know that's kind of a unpopular opinion. I didn't hate them. I didn't love them either. They were,
yeah,
they were
yeah,
what they were, and I was excited to see my favorite
yeah,
characters and I liked some
yeah,
stuff and didn't like other parts of it. So it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, there's a
yeah,
lot of fundamental misunderstandings of those characters, but also too, I'm a fan of multiverse stuff. So it's okay that
yeah,
those characters were different.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just
Of
like one of those
course.
things where it was like, and I loved like, Jason Momoa's Aquaman, like I'm a big Aquaman fan. So that was very cool to
Do you
see
like
like,
him as Aquaman? Because
yeah, I think that
he he throws trash in the ocean, man. It's like he's Aquaman and he's throwing trash in the ocean.
okay,
What the
but like
fuck is
he
that?
already knows how much like glass isn't going to hurt anything. He throws a water, but he already knows how much stuff is down there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So no,
it's
no,
not
I'm
gonna make a difference. Like just one bottle. Fuck it.
right. Also, too, maybe in his universe, he's already like cleaned up the big
Yeah,
ocean garbage patch. So he's like. Yeah, so this is just
yeah,
glass. It's fine. It's just gonna turn into more sand at the bottom of the ocean. It's okay. It's
yeah.
not like he's throwing,
Okay, yeah,
car
okay,
bat.
yeah.
It's not like he's throwing car batteries in there or anything. You know.
Yeah,
So but yeah, no. I mean, I thought that was like an interesting take on the character because he was like, oh, I'm
yeah. Well,
emotionally brooding
they
and
they had to do something because they couldn't make Aquaman from like Super Friends
yeah,
into a
well,
movie. It
the
wouldn't
old Super
work.
Friends
Yeah,
cartoon.
yeah,
Yeah, it's Tusky, I need you to go over here and move this giant rock so this whale can get out. It was always
yeah.
like, I did like that character. Yeah, yeah. But like, I mean, like, I don't know, still he's a visually striking character. And I
Yeah,
love the fact that like he got the in his own movie, he got the like the orange and gold and green,
yeah,
chainmail and he finally got it. He got the big staff, he got the trident, and he's flying around doing stuff. That was awesome. I love Patrick Wilson. I love Jason Momoa. So it was like really cool to see. And I mean, the rest of the cast too is just great. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a big Aquaman fan. I love Aquaman is definitely in the mix. Starman, the Jack Knight Starman from the 1990s, which if you've never read that, Diogo, I highly recommend it. It's this whole
It's
series, but it's one of the best comics ever written, and it's pretty
okay.
self-contained. You need to have like a little working knowledge of like but they explain most of it, right? But
Okay.
it's literature. It's like high literature. It's like this like, but it's like told in a very relatable and interesting way. But it's like James Robinson Starman, obviously top three, and Jay Garrick, my childhood love, the first Flash, Golden Age Flash with the wings on his helmet. That is like he was like I saw that as a kid, and I was just like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So I'm a massive Jay Garrick fan. So but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just love comics. If you ever want to get into the DC universe, let me know. I got a lot of recommendations. So,
Yeah, yeah, I
but
bet.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I remember when the death of Superman and came out. So I was into that. I bought that. I bought like the different comics afterwards because they have like four different Supermans and who is the real one and stuff like this. And we had that one with Batman who got paraplegic, and we had Azrael subbing for
yeah,
him,
yeah.
and it was this Batman.
Nightfall. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I like that because he was like this cruel Batman. He would like kill people. It was weird, but it was dark and
yeah,
it was different. And I was into that back then, and I remember, but it's
yeah, yeah.
so long ago. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah, in the 90s, they had everybody was extreme and cool, and they had
yeah,
the thing. But I always thought that costume, that Azrael Batman costume, was really neat. And then
yeah,
they did some interesting things with the character later on. But yeah, that it was like I thought that was interesting, and I always loved the Superboy character. I thought that was great. I loved
yeah.
John Henry Irons Steel,
Yeah,
and
the
that was
my
like that was a cool
with
character.
the steel armor was really cool too. I like that one
Yeah,
with
and he's like
big heavy
he's
mallet. Yeah,
half Superman, half Iron Man. That's a cool
yeah,
character, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And especially as a kid, and then Eradicator. Oh gosh, I loved Eradicator. I was always on the fence. I could never tell if I loved his costume or hated his costume. But
yeah,
I thought he was a cool character. And then of course Cyborg Superman. You can't
yeah,
you can't beat that. So but I love how he's a Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic,
yeah,
homage parody
yeah.
pastiche where
Yeah, the
he's
cyborg one
he and his
seems like Superman and Terminator together. It's kind of
yeah,
scary.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But well, did you know how he got his the Hank Henshaw character, how he got his powers?
No,
Was they
I
couldn't
forgot. Yeah.
they yeah, they were like, oh yeah, he and his three crewmates broke into a science thing for an experimental rocket, and they went out into space. It's like literally just the Fantastic Four origin story, but they all died, and then the gamma radiation or whatever, whatever the non-copyrighted version of gamma radiation, fused him with the ship, the experimental ship, and that's how he became Cyborg Superman. So I always loved that as a kid. That
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
really like I was just like, this is so interesting. So,
Yeah.
but anyways,
Yeah.
I
That
love
that's
I love I
something
love DC Comics. Yeah.
that's something I can totally see for PermaQuest. Like the aliens fall here and they merge with the ship, and the ship is an
Oh
alien that's
yeah,
alive. Yeah.
yeah,
That can work
yeah,
for sure. Well, Hodag, we are almost reaching 2 hours again, and time just flies
yeah.
by when we are talking, and we're
Yeah,
talking
you'll
about,
have to cut a lot of this out, I think.
yeah, not a lot, a lot of interesting stuff and suggestions and things for to watch and to look for, and we're talking about gaming ideas, and I think it was very very productive. It was completely chaos. I didn't have any questions prepared, but I think it worked fine. Do you have any last minute weird messages to send out to the weirdos who listen to us on their podcast?
Oh, yeah, I just, stay weird, be true to yourself, try to eliminate bigotry from your heart, be open to everybody, and
Yeah.
try to be as good as you possibly can be
Yeah.
in the area that you are, and do the best that you can for yourself. I guess that would be
Yeah.
my message to everybody,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of I think a lot of turmoil and hatred in the world, and you just gotta do the best that you can in the area that you are. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
be certain that we are one another. I am you, you are me. Like we have to treat one another because we are just reflections of different me's we could be. Like we feel that thing like we love Pete Holmes, but something he says a lot that if I were that person, I would be that person. So that's it. If I were you, I would be you. So that's why I have to protect and love you the way you are, because we could be that person that we are having some problem with if we should try to understand them and welcome them in some way, I think. So yeah.
exactly. Every person on Earth has just as much internal thought process,
Yeah.
internal, like they have they have people that they were raised by, they have people in their life that they love, they have people in the life that they maybe disagree with. And it's like, if you realize, I think that, like, there's a lot of people, it's hard to remember that as a human being, right? It's hard to remember
Yeah.
that, like, everybody on Earth has, and I'm not saying that you should, obviously, if someone's doing something wrong, if someone's trying to harm someone else, that's completely different. But, like,
Yeah.
at a base level, we're all people. And I feel
Yeah.
like, not to get too flower child on everybody, but, like, I just try to live my life, and let other people live
Yeah.
theirs, and make sure that I'm doing the best that I can for the people around me, and make sure that I'm causing the least amount of harm possible
Yeah.
in the world. So, but yeah, totally. Also, I did have that idea about the audio game. So if we can get that to work out, you can cut this part off if it doesn't work out. But I created an audio game
Yeah.
as filler. I offered it up to Diogo initially, and I was like, if you don't have anything to release, here, take my game. So I have
Yeah.
this diceless audio game that you play, where you have you go through, and all you need is five fingers, or you could have a sheet of paper, but basically you could play it with five fingers, and it's a sort of a guessing game where you have to guess a number between 1 and 3. If you guess wrong, the character, you have to put your finger down because the character dies. And there's a lot of secret surprises in there too. So did you get a chance to listen to it, Diogo?
Yeah, I started it, but I didn't finish, and like I had a full day and stuff. But yeah, but I listened to
No,
it, and we
yeah.
can edit the parts that you said need to change, and I will try to
Yes.
put it at the back of the end of the episode, too.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So if it doesn't work out, no problem at all.
Yeah,
I just
I have to
figured
figure out how
this
to
is
download the audio too, because I don't have the download from YouTube stuff, but I'll try to figure that out.
I'll try to look it up. If worse comes to worse, I'll try to get in my old computer and see if it's still on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. It's always super fun talking to you, Diogo, and I'm glad that we get a chance to have another more informal conversation. And always great to speak with you. Always great to talk to your friends.
For sure. Can you go out and say us the phrase? So just say, keep it weird.
Absolutely. Keep it weird.
Thank you for listening to Weird Games and Weirder People. If you'd like to keep up with the show, please subscribe to be notified when we release new episodes. If you'd like to support us, please leave a review or head on to code-fi.com/WGNWP. See you next time, and remember, weird is the new wonderful.